This is the Real Estate Power Play Podcast, getting you the information that you need to be a successful real estate investor. Hosted by Mark Monroe, Ronald Walker, Gabe Rodarte, and me, Marty Grizzanti. Combined, we've done thousands of real estate transactions. So get ready for real stories and true case studies on finding deals, growing portfolios, and making money. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Real Estate Power Play Podcast. We have an awesome guest today that we're excited to go into some deep diving into transactions and how we're doing deals. So that will be like the major crux of this whole podcast. We have Mark, my man. Mark, what's up, dude?
Hey, what's going on? How you doing, Gabe? You look like you're trying to stay warm down there in Texas, huh?
Man, it's so weird in Texas. It was 35 yesterday, and this morning it's like 55.
Now, Joel,
So
where are
weird.
you? I think you're in the colder part of the country, aren't you?
I'm in St. Louis, and so
St. Louis.
it is not. I mean, today's like 50 degrees, which is amazing. It feels like it's summer. Like we've had a cold stretch here. It's been rough.
Yeah, you guys have had it cold for a while. The whole northern sector. So we are in February 14th, Valentine's Day for everybody. Nice. So Joel, all right, let's get into this. For those who don't know Joel, all right, we're gonna let him do his own intro so he can tell us all the stuff that he's doing, how long he's been doing it all. So, man, how you been, and what's been happening in your world?
Yeah. Well, first off, 2022 has been probably the hardest year in my industry, which is the retail mortgage industry. I've been in the business since 2006, started in the banking world, got to the outside sales world along the way. I'm a real estate investor myself, single families, multifamilies, commercial stuff, short-term rentals, and now a land development deal that we are in process with in Florida. Got my own podcast that I started this past year, Instagram, YouTube, just kind of going down this social media path that I never, ever envisioned doing, a year ago or 5 years ago. So totally. A lot going on, and just going.
So catch us up on everything that's going on. 2022 has been crazy. You've been involved for a while. Tell us what you have been doing, right, in this last, definitely last year, but in the years prior.
Yeah, I mean, in 2022, we acquired a piece of land in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida. It's sitting on the bayou on the bay side of. So there's an area called 30A. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with that. So you got Destin, you got Panama City, you've got Pensacola. 30A is this little stretch in between Destin and Panama City. That's just one of the hottest areas in short-term rentals in Florida. It's just blowing up down there. And there are properties that are $18 million, $15 million, like on the water. It's crazy. So people from the Midwest, St. Louis, Tennessee, Texas, Kentucky, especially Georgia, they flock to this area for vacation in the summer, the white sandy beaches. So we acquired a plot of land that's a couple of miles north of the actual beach. It's on the bay. It's going to have water access, a boat ramp. And so we're going to be building over 20 houses there. So that's been something that's a big project that we've been working on raising some capital, financing still in play, just getting some of the things that, going on that. So it's been a little bit of a slow process, but that's the big project that we're working on.
Wow. Those are huge projects. Go ahead, Mark.
No, so Joel, let's dive in a little bit, with your experience talking, this is going to be good for listeners that are real estate investors and want to know a little bit more about the originating of the loans aspect of it and understanding a little bit more about that. And, we just went through, we just did a double closing ourselves a few weeks ago. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit about, what you've been doing for the last on the loan origination side. And then that's awesome about the projects, and you and I have talked quite a bit where you're trying to get into more investing and stuff. So that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about like where you've been in the past, 12 months and what you see going forward in the next 12 months on the loan origination side, where you're seeing on the sales and stuff.
Yeah. When you look at the housing market right now compared to 2008, 2009, and I start there because there's a lot of headlines and a lot of news talking about the housing market and a crash, and who knows what happens going forward. There could be a very, very severe downturn. I have no idea. But what I see from a data standpoint doesn't really reflect that, because you have a couple different things that are happening. One, rates went up so fast from December of 2021. We were closing loans in the very, very low threes. And, in 21, we were closing loans in the twos. And we had never seen rates that low before until COVID hit. So COVID literally just changed the game plan, the landscape of the mortgage industry and where rates were, because 3.25 had always been the floor. And speaking of Teresa Torres, who's a friend of mine, and we did a lot of VA loans back in the 2012, 13, 16 timeframe, where rates did get that low and they've bounced up and down. So long story short, rates went to unseen levels before. And so you have this amazing amount of demand for mortgages and properties, and people being able to afford properties that they otherwise may not have been able to afford before. And so 2021, a lot of mortgage companies were doing a lot of refinances. That's not something that we really do a lot of. We do them, but it's not really our bread and butter. So then 2022 happens, right? So rates are in the low threes. Inflation starts to pick up. And inflation, the metrics are always a lagging indicator, because CPI is calculated on a 12-month rolling average. So in October of 2021, that's the month where the Fed had a pretty sizable reading on their CPI metric for the month. And later, shortly thereafter in November, they used the term inflation being transitory. And they didn't make any substantial moves until, I think, December is when they actually did that first rate hike. And so when you go into 2022, rates went from the threes, and by June, rates hit mid sixes. So you're talking rates doubling in basically 6 months, which has only really happened from my research in early 80s. 81, I think is what the year was. So you have this massive scaling of rates going up. And, the last half of 2022 from a mortgage origination standpoint basically became non-existent for several reasons. Yeah, rates were high, but not only that, the sentiment changed. The sentiment went from, hey, we're going, things are growing, we're building, confidence. And then all the headlines, all the news were really negative about housing crashes and prices are going to come down, which they may, who knows? So it was really kind of a history of really 2 seasons in 2022. Things are going okay in the first half. The second half just completely turned off. So you had a lot of layoffs in the mortgage industry, and I'm frankly surprised there haven't been more based on the level of activity.
Yeah, and there's already been a ton. So you're saying that kind of is I don't know if it was a shocker, but it definitely is helping me grab perspective going, dude, there might even be more happening right now. So there already has been a ton of layoffs. There just hasn't been at the level that you're talking about, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there's been a lot. Wells Fargo, the banks, our company at Fairway, we've had several layoffs, but yeah, I mean, we're talking like really historically low activity and sales numbers. Like the inventory is still really, really low. And and frankly, that's probably the only thing that's saving the housing market in all reality, is that there's just not a lot of inventory out there.
Well, because mainly it's because people don't want to sell their properties if they're at a 3%, 3.5% interest rate. Why would they sell and then end up in a 6%? It just doesn't make sense. So that's kind of one of the reasons why the housing is kind of low. Gabe, I'm sorry, I cut you off on that.
No, I was going to say that there's still builds happening. Like I'm in Houston metro area, so there's still new build communities, right? And there's still new communities all over. I was just in Orlando. There's still building happening over there. Although Orlando's a little different, there's still these building areas. You're doing stuff over in Panama City area. Like, so there's still growth. It's just a different type of growth that we're seeing. And guys, for those who don't know, today is Valentine's Day. It's February 14th, 2023. Just grab a perspective if you're listening a couple months down the line. So what do we do? So what are you seeing that's happening for a self-employed person? Are they kind of stuck? Are they just in a tight spot and going, just gonna have to hang tight for a while, or what?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation too. Because as somebody, you have more and more people that, especially coming out of the pandemic, that, hey, you know what? I got laid off my job. I'll build a business on the side. And if you're building your business, and let's say 2021 was your first year doing that, and then 22 was your second year, And let's say you had a negative $5,000 income in 21 with your write-offs, and then 22 you're at 50 grand. I mean, a negative number from a self-employed borrower standpoint is not good from a lending and underwriting standpoint. And so when you take a look at someone's 2-year average, if it doesn't look very strong, we're looking at the bottom line. There are some things you can add back in, like depreciation, but self-employed borrowers, I mean, at the end of the day, we're looking at the tax returns. And so if your numbers don't look strong, it's going to limit what you can do in terms of purchasing properties on the residential lending side. And as a consequence, you've seen more and more other tools come out of the lending world with your DSCR, your loans out there that are just based for investors. Hey, I want to go buy a property, base it off of the rents on the property, and if the metrics work, boom, you can qualify. There are other products like bank statement loans, things like that are more broker tools, but those rates are going to be higher, and especially with rates going up, it's pushed a lot of self-employed buyers out of the market. And then on top of that, just from a grand scheme of things, your Gen Z or Gen Y, that first-time home buyer is getting squeezed out of the market. And this is such an interesting conversation, something that with my platform, I'm trying to tackle a little bit more into it. And I don't know if we're going to go down that dovetail. But the average age of a first-time home buyer went from the late 20s, and the latest data from National Association of Realtors is 36. I think last year was 34. But this year it's 36. That's a massive upswing in a very short period of time. And we talk about the increase in prices. I think I was doing some some analysis. I think in the last 3 or 4 years, housing, the average median average sale price of homes went from 310 to like 490 or something like that. So like a 50% increase in housing prices over a 3 or 4 years to be span.
Wow.
Yeah,
wages didn't increase that much in 3 or 4 years, you know?
well, it's not normal to have 40% increases in 2 years like that. So the moderate normal is like 3 to 5%. But back to what you're saying in that data, you're absolutely correct about now the children are leaving at home. I was watching a story on the news, and they're saying that all the luxury items like clothing and bags, because these children are still living at home and into their early 30s now. So different aspects of the industry is doing well. They called it something, but it's just amazing. So you mentioned something here a second ago, and it's floating around in a lot of real estate investor groups. And I've seen a lot of people asking what that is. Why don't you dive into it a little bit more about the DSCR type of situation? What is that, and what's that stand for? And kind of talk a little bit about that, because you're seeing a lot of that out there, and I see a lot of people asking questions about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of context. You got your residential loan. I'm going to go buy a house, do a 30-year fixed, live in it, boom. There are residential loans out there for investors where you're going to put 20 or 25% down. Now, if you're buying a single family house, you can actually put down 15%. And from a historical standpoint, I'll just use kind of a 5% as kind of your average rate. So if I'm going to buy a property as a primary residence, maybe I'm at 5% on a 30-year fixed. If I want to purchase a property as an investment property, straight investment rental, and I put 25% down, your rate's probably going to be maybe 6%, 5.75. It's going to be higher, right? And then if you put down less money, like 20 and then 15%, your rate's going to be even higher. So that's just kind of like your baseline on the residential side of things. On the commercial side of things, you've got kind of 3 buckets that I would kind of break it down into. You've got your banks, your commercial banks, like your local bank, your credit union, your Chase, your Citi, all these banks that do commercial lending as well. And their standard product is a 5-year balloon, 20-year amortization with a rate that's going to be pretty much tied to prime. So prime, I think prime right now is 7.75%, something like that. So your typical commercial lender, commercial bank is going to probably offer you a product probably in the 8s in all reality, which, 15 months ago, that was in the 4s. So you're talking literally doubling. The DSCR loan is a product that's kind of in between. So you have your banking loan, you have your hard money up here, and this private money option is kind of this in-between bucket. And that DSCR, debt service coverage ratio, is that product. And they're just looking at the rents, just make sure that the rents can cover the debt servicing and taxes and insurance. And if they do by a certain level, 1.25% is one metric that a lot of lenders look at. And the problem is that with rates going up, it's squeezed a lot of people being able to get approved for these loans. So it's also slowing down the volume.
Yeah, I can imagine where you're, if you are listening to this and you're a buyer and you are doing the BRRRR method, or you're doing a refi method or anything else like that, or you're trying to get into a deal, I'm seeing it through all of my chats that I'm in and the different groups that I'm part of, that they're connecting with me asking for, what kind of lending do you have? What else do you use? And the reason why is those rates just don't make sense anymore for a single family home, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-story in a certain type of neighborhood, right? There's only so much rent you can get from that property, and how much revenue can you get per year. And so we're seeing that also, Joel, across the board. And I'm sure you are also.
100%. 100%.
So that's what makes your 22 look pretty crazy, right? What are you doing? So you do RMLO type stuff also, right?
I'm sorry, RMLO?
Are you an RMLO also, or you just do the transactional side? What was the double close thing?
No, he's a residential mortgage loan originator. Yeah, he is.
Okay.
You're a licensed
Yeah.
loan. Yeah. We
Right.
in the investor world we call it RMLO,
Okay.
residential mortgage loan originator. So, but I don't
Right.
think you're doing stuff for seller financing. You're strictly doing it for your institutional lending, correct?
Yeah. So we have, because I'm an investor myself, and I've been looking at different products in different states, and also calling on behalf of other clients, calling a commercial lender and getting a response. And then, this is not like right now, I'm talking about going back in the last 24 months. Getting a response from a commercial lender is like pulling teeth. I've had very, very, unfavorable success getting a hold of a commercial lender. So that was one of the things that we did also build a little bit of a broker shop that does some private commercial lending.
Nice.
We just broker it out to some of the leader ones, Lima ones, Share States is there's plenty of other private companies that we can broker out to. That's just one example. But I'm not an expert on subject to, but it's something that I know is becoming more of a topic. And so I've been doing a lot of research, reading Mark's book, and trying to figure out the logistics of how do you actually make the deal work? Because like some of the people make it sound so easy, right? But when you actually get to the financing part of it and having that second position, and a title company is going to close a deal, and escrow, like that's where the details get confusing. So I haven't figured that part out in terms of that part.
You
So
really
maybe
need
you guys can share.
you really need a good title company that understands that part of it. That they'll walk you through that process, make sure they understand a subject too. And they'll be able to help you with that. But if you have any questions, you and I can jump on and talk a little bit later about that stuff. But
Cool.
But Gabe, you had a question there. You're asking about the RMLO.
Yeah, I wanted to see, like, what are you seeing? So we talked about, for recap, we're just talking about self-employed people. How are they doing it? People are getting squeezed out of new housing. People are getting squeezed out of like a lot of stuff. But then yet we have the sector of new homes that are being built. We have production still happening. Things are still going on. And what I've seen, now correct me if I'm wrong, I could be way off, but what I've seen is that a lot of those builders have their own in-house financing of some sort, and they're able to stagger or tier their financing to where it's,
Yeah, that's
4.2 right now, and the next year it's 4.5, and then, or whatever, it goes down, and or 5.2, 4.5, 3.9 or whatever. So how are they able to do that? Like, have you seen these things?
Yeah, that's a great point. And there's actually a couple different levels of that. So you have your builder that's sitting on inventory that, when they started these projects 12 months ago, we're in a completely different environment now, struggling to be able to unload product. So with rates where they are, let's just say 6.5%, you have one example is a 2-1 buy down. Hey, you know what? Like, we're just going to basically buy your rate down 2% in the first year. It costs about 2 points at closing. The second year, the rate goes down only by 1%. And then by the third year, you're going back to your normal rates. And if you refinance after year one, there actually is a refund of some of the funds that are paid. The problem with it, so it's a great product, right? The problem is that you have a lot of buyers who, I need my closing costs covered by the builder to be able to get in the house alone, because I have my money for a down payment, but I don't have money for the closing costs.
Right.
So if I put 5% down on a conventional house, on a conventional loan, the builder, the seller maximum is 3% of the purchase price that they can cover in closing costs. So let's say they're already covering 3%. and then you want to throw in a 2-1 buy down that's going to have more costs that they can cover, well, you exceed the maximum of seller concessions. Now, on an FHA loan, the limit is 6%. So you're going to have a lot more flexibility. So you have a lot more FHA loans being done because of that with builders. So that's kind of what's been going on for the last 6 months or so. And kind of going back to the builders that have their own financing, mortgage companies, there's another thing that's really cool that's been going on for a while. It's called forward commitments. And what that means is that, like, for example, us as Fairway, we can go out in the secondary markets, acquire a certain block of funding at a certain rate, and have a builder basically commit to using us as a lender. And let's say the rate is 6.5% today, and we're gonna agree that we're gonna buy this block of funding for $2 million or $5 million, whatever it is, and we're gonna get it at we're gonna pay 2 points to buy the rate down to 5.25 or 5.5, something like that. So what's cool about that is that amount of money that's being paid to buy the rate down does not go into your bucket of seller concessions. It's all done behind the scenes. So that's an opportunity for builders that you may have seen, like a DR Horton out there, or a few other builders, Toll Brothers, that maybe are able to offer certain rates at a certain level for a period of time, because they're basically going on the secondary markets and buying a block of funds and securing those rates. And that's something that's really been helpful, I think, for some of the quick delivery inventory.
Yeah, I totally been seeing these things out there. I got another question that has to do with these loans and stuff, and not these particular ones, but are you starting to hear any scuttle or anything? Again, this is for those who are listening, guys. This is basically Valentine's Day on loan defaults or anything like that that's about to come about, or other people that are, or even commercial loan defaults or anything like that.
That's a really good question, and a lot of these data points are lagging indicators, right? And yeah. I wish I had more examples of this from a default standpoint. So I don't know. And I'm surprised there hasn't been more defaults than we have in the last 6 months, because of the moratoriums that happen on foreclosures, right, and also, the rent and evictions. But I see a lot of headlines comparing things to 08 or 09, or like, hey, evictions or foreclosures have risen 300% in the last 12 months. Well, it's like, well, what are you comparing it to?
Right.
So we compare it to 12 months ago when there were no foreclosures. It looks like a big increase.
Right.
But historically speaking, going back 15 years, right now the numbers, and I'm very much ballparking this, so don't quote me on it, but I think the numbers are not too crazy high, but a lot of it are lagging indicators. So, in 6 months or a year, who knows what changes?
Right.
Well, I think what we're seeing is a lot of investors going out there and buying properties, or trying to take some of that debt over, instead of the banks going through the foreclosures, like you mentioned about the subject twos, and stuff to that nature. I think we might be seeing a little bit more than that. I want to take this in a little bit of a different direction, because this is, you guys, your service blew me away. Like I mentioned, we just closed on a deal, and I had a lease option, where I was purchasing it from my seller, and then I was selling it to my end buyer, and you guys handle a double close. And I hear a lot of people out there in the industry saying, hey, you know what, you need to make sure, if you're doing a double close, you're going with a hard money lender, or you're going with somebody a little different. But the particular client that you guys gave a loan to for us, it was a regular conforming loan. Isn't that correct?
Yep. Just a regular conventional loan. Yep.
Right. So people listening, if you're an investor, and if you need to do a double close, and you want, they always say, if it's going to be conforming FHA, VA, stay away from it. Well, FHA, we probably wouldn't be able to do that, because you need 90-day seasoning. Is that correct?
Yep.
So you wouldn't be able to do that. So they had to go conforming. What about VA? Is there any seasoning there?
There's not.
Okay,
No.
so just the FHA. So when we talk about seasoning, on that, why don't you kind of tell people a little bit about that, and what made it different working with you all and taking it through that process? Because I've heard nightmare stories where we're there a day before closing and they can't do it because it's a double closing.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about underwriting is a very subjective process. And you've got the guidelines that are published by all the agencies, Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie Mae, which is for FHA and for VA. And then from those guidelines, you've got a lot of gray area in interpretation. And so you're going to have a lot of policies on certain, all different parts of the lending process that one lender may do one thing and another lender may do a different thing on the exact same situation. So unfortunately, there is gray area, but fortunately, there is gray area that you can use a little bit more common sense lending. And in this situation, you're talking about, the subject to or contract. And again, correct me if I'm wrong in terms of the termination of the terminology. You got a seller, and then you have the entity, Mark's entity, that's going to basically be the entity that's matching this new buyer from the original seller. Call it a middleman, whatever. But that process, one of the hangups that we were having in terms of the timing of it is, well, one part of it was, hey, we want to have the transaction to Mark's entity, have it be recorded with the county, and then have the new transaction. Well, that's not going to work in certain counties or states. It's going to take too much time. But we were able to get everybody on the same board, because you have the title company and their underwriters, and then the mortgage company and our underwriters have to get on the same page with the order of operations and allow the transaction to Mark and then our mortgage to our buyer be able to just go flow and then record at the same time with the county. Yep. And that's the high level, simple part of it. But it just takes a matter of getting all the parties on the same page, all the underwriters on the same page. And unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of conversations for it to make sense, because this is not common, and also doesn't always make sense logically. So it's got to keep going over it. Yeah, yep. Really, yeah.
So you can actually do this on a regular wholesale transaction. This one was a lease sandwiches option. So, we did the same thing. What really made it a difference is, like you said, the communication between your processing, your underwriting, and you with the title company. And the title company on this one was a superstar, because they closed with me and they hurried up and recorded it. And within an hour later, we could go ahead and then close with you at the end. And that's what made the whole transaction go nice and smooth on that. Gabe, you've done some double closings, right?
Yeah, we used to do a ton of double closings. I don't do as much of them as I used to. But yeah, this is golden for those who are listening to it. One of the things I like about what you do, Mark, is the creativity that you bring to every freaking transaction. Sometimes like another creative transaction, but it's your gift, man. It's what you're good at doing, and you know how to see through it. And plus, you've done all the mortgage stuff before, so you guys have this language and this just a camaraderie of how you're able to process through the system. So, Joel, what are you seeing when it comes to like the investor space? You own some properties. You're doing some of this new build stuff, which is really crazy. I mean, I know some friends that have B&Bs in that area, and they are not cheap at all. And I'm like, wow, okay. What are you seeing in your space? And you said you're in St. Louis, but you branch outside also, or where do you do?
Yeah, so I'm personally licensed in 23 states. I do a lot of business in the DC market. We're a preferred lender for a major builder in Maryland. And that whole kind of builder space is unique, because you got builders who have their own lenders, and you have some builders that will have a panel lenders, and we're one of those for one of the builders. So East Coast, Middle, West Coast, we don't do a lot Northern, Northeast. And that's just kind of, I've been doing this for a long time, since 2006, and just kind of got into a niche working with a lot of military clientele in different parts of the country, and just kept on growing and building. But to the question about investors, right now I'm seeing newer investors being able to have trouble getting financing on this kind of, whether it be a bank or private money. If you don't have experience, and you don't have a little extra money to put down, maybe the requirement is 20 or 25% down to be able to qualify for some of these products. And what's cool about this kind of private money sector is you've got kind of this bridge loan. That's kind of your 1 or 2 year intermediate loan. That's interest only. Cool. You can do fix and flips with that. And then you also have got a 30-year fixed product out there. So you can lock in a rate, have a better amortization, et cetera. But where you're getting squeezed out is the experience. There is more risk on the table with rates being higher and uncertainty in the housing markets and prices and all that stuff. And so they're going to want to see 5% down more than the buckets that were going to be required. So you're going to have a little bit stronger requirements for investors that have no experience or very little experience. And so because of that, somebody that may be a better fit for a commercial loan or a private money loan may have to fit into a residential loan, which then makes the qualifying part just not saying that's not necessarily more difficult or challenging.
What does
but
that
just
look like?
different.
What do you mean? Dig into that.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. I'm talking to a person who, and this is actually, you know what, I probably shouldn't talk about this one because it's still going on right now. So I'll skip this, but it was a multifamily situation with a person that just got married in Texas. And, you know, when you buy a multifamily and you know, using FHA, you're talking 3.5% down, right? But you can't have more than one FHA loan. And in Texas, if you're married and you're going on a loan by yourself, a residential lender has to count the other spouse's debts. They don't count the benefits, but they have to count the debts. So that's a whole different angle. But the biggest thing is cash. Whenever I'm talking to somebody about buying property in general, the biggest limiting factor is not income, it's not credit, it's cash. The other things you can kind of help and fix with.
Like cash that I have in bank?
Well, okay, just money in general. So on the residential side, if I want to go buy a $200,000 investment property, doesn't matter if it's single family or multifamily, whatever, I have to be able to have that money in my account. And I have to have the money in my account for a period of time. And we call that seasoning on our side of things, because if underwriting sees a deposit go into the account, they're going to ask questions about it. And if it's a personal loan, if it's a loan from whoever else, they're going to ask questions about it. And you can't use unsecured debt to help with the down payment. So if I'm going to go a residential loan, I have to season that money wherever it's coming from. I have to season it for a few months so that underwriting doesn't see it going to the account. On the commercial side or the private money lending side, that part of the process is not a requirement. They just want to see the money's in the account. They don't care where it's coming from. They're not going to ask where it comes from. So that's where you're going to have more flexibility, more creativity. If, hey, I've got a really good deal here. I know my profile, my income, my credit is strong to make the deal work. I got to go find the cash. And people can be creative to do that and figure it out on their own. And so that's kind of this dynamic that I'm seeing is, hey, things are tightening up on the commercial lending side or the private money side of things, where maybe it's easier to get a deal done because you're sourcing the money for down payment elsewhere. And therefore, maybe you have to be a little bit more intentional in timing it, where you're getting the money or you have the money and you're going to do a residential loan and make sure you're fitting the guidelines and seasoning and all that stuff. So that's the biggest thing is the cash part that I'm saying is a major impact.
Now, what if it's an investment loan? Do they still want to see seasoning on that? They don't.
Oh, on the residential side?
Yeah, let's say it's a single family
yes.
home. They're buying it as an investment property. What do they want to see for that? Is that the same thing? They need to see the seasoning where it comes from?
Yep, they do. Yep. And not only that, they're also going to want to see reserves left over. 6 months reserves is just one example. It could be a retirement account, could be a TSP, could be Roth, checking things, whatever, stocks.
Got it.
They're going to want to see the reserves.
Got it. So talk a little bit. You said you mentioned you have a podcast as well.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about it. What do you get into on that?
I mean, it kind of does fall into the real estate world, but it's called Strive for 25. And the basic premise is, you know, if someone can build their life, shape their life to be able to save 25% of their income, which is first off very, very hard to do. But if they can do that, then you're going to be setting yourself up to be able to make choices and options of how to get ahead and invest, save and invest. And so that's one part of it. And, you know, once you have the money that you're saving, it could be $100, it could be $200 because you have to start somewhere. Well, then what do you do with it? And real estate is a big thing that we talk about because real estate, you know, when you look at the landscape of wealth distribution in this country, if you take out the top 10%, you know, and that middle class, about 60% of the wealth that's created and generated is through real estate. So the everyday person is generating wealth through real estate. And the best example, well, there's two things I want to bring up real quick. So one, I talk about the stair-step method a lot. And this is a way for the everyday person, just somebody like me, everyday person can get into the game. I bought a property as a primary residence, put 5% down, saved up, bought the next one a few years later, and turned the old one into a rental. So 5% down, and I just turned it into a rental. So you're bypassing your 20 or 25% down requirement. If you do that 4 times, the story that I talk about is, you know, 150, and then the second one 250, and then the third one 350, and then 450 over an 8-year period. You're building a $3 million portfolio with $60,000 of down payment money. And again, this is a very simple example. So you're turning $60,000 into $3 million over a 30-year period. That's massive. That's massive. You talk about leverage and scaling. And, before I talk about this other example, the first-time home buyer average being 36 right now. If someone can get into the game at 25 and shape their life to be able to get in the game at 25 and then buy 4 properties over a 7-8 year period, like they're going to have a $2 million portfolio by the time the average person is buying their first property. And they're going to be light years ahead of that person, not only on wealth, not only on like security and wealth and passive income, but think about that person who it's hard as hell to buy property right now for 25, to have the money saved. But if you can shape your life to be able to figure that out, it's almost like, the diamond in the rough, that pressure makes that diamond. If you can figure out how to buy a house right now at age 22 or 25, 30, you're internally, innately building the skills to crush life. And if you can do that and do it over a period of time, you can do whatever we want to do. And like, that's the thing that we're trying to talk about on this channel. And it ends up being side hustles and building a business and affiliate marketing. If you can figure out a way to be able to generate extra income right now, that's a pathway to be able to get ahead. And if you can do that, then you have choices and options.
No, I've been saying that to, like people coming out of the military, use your VA eligibility immediately and then do what's called, they call it house hacking. You live in one room and rent out the other rooms to your buddies. I mean, if you're, like you mentioned, if you're in your 20s, rent it out, get some roommates and rent it out instead of, and you can come out way ahead. But that's great stuff on that stuff. So yeah, I that's really good. And you guys do the VA loans as well, correct?
Yeah. You could get me talking for hours about that because there's just some powerful things that you can do. I mean, like, the DC market, the county limit out there is 1.0896 million. So what that means is like, okay, I have a property that I'm in Virginia Beach. I bought 2 years ago. I'm going to get stationed up PCS up to the DC area. And so basically, if you do the reverse math on that, if I have a home for $300,000 that I purchased originally, that means I can purchase a property up to over $700K using a VA loan with no down payment. There's enough eligibility there to be able to do that. And then talking about multifamily, it's a whole different conversation. Like the kind of limit up there is, I think it's like almost over $2 million to be able to purchase multifamily.
Wait, you're saying that in a VA?
Mm-hmm.
They can do that, use a VA eligibility up to $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Up to how many units?
Up to 4.
Wow. That's awesome. I didn't know that stuff. So yeah, last time I knew there was about 550. So where can somebody go to see where and what markets? Is it published someplace? And
yeah. I mean, if you just type in VA loan limits, it pops up. And if anybody has any questions on that stuff, you can message me and you can Google my name, get the Instagram, email, whatever. We can answer questions.
How do we get? So you're on Facebook?
Yeah. So my Strive for 25 platform, strive for the number 25.
25.
That's on Instagram. It's on all the podcasts, Apple, whatever. Yep. And then if you Google my name and Fairway, you're going to have my personal information that pops up as well.
Okay, cool. Guys, I don't want to cut it short because I got a couple other technical questions I would have asked, but this might Mark and I will ask some technical questions all day long and geek out about it. So, dude, I'm glad you came on here because you helped answer some of the questions that I had, just some of the questions that Mark had in lieu of, what he was doing. You answered some of mine. So this is really good. So guys, if you need this information, if you want to get a hold of him, he sounds like he's a wealth of information and knowledge. And how often are you helping people out through this process and just educating them and stuff like that? Is this mainly through the podcast or, connecting them through Messenger and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I have people that message me on Instagram, on Facebook as well about this stuff. People that I haven't talked with in 5 years, but yeah, new people. So yeah, you can message me online for sure.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, guys. Well, we need to wrap this one up. Thank you so much, Joel, for all your help, dude. Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. Get to know you more and just how your whole business and what you're doing. Those who need to get a hold of us, get a hold of Mark, me, Marty, Ronnie. You have all of our contact information in here. You have our YouTube channel and just search us. Real Estate Power Play, and we'll be able to help you out
Gabe,
any way possible.
One thing. So 2023, the way inflation is coming and scaling down and decelerating.
Here we go.
I think 2023 could be an amazing year for a lot of people. I think you're going to see inflation getting into the 3% range by the end of the year. Potentially. And I think you're going to see a lot of more confidence coming in the markets. This is my prediction.
Wow.
So 2022, a rough year, transformational for me in a lot of ways. But by the middle of the year, when the July readings come out for CPI, you could see some pretty positive stuff going on in the markets.
That's awesome. So that's definitely a breath of fresh air for everybody who's listening to this.
Sorry to cut you off there.
No, that's good. That's good. Guys, thank you so much for hopping on this call. And Mark, you got anything?
No, it's been a great show. Thank you so much for Joe coming on. Gabe, it's always a pleasure.
All right, guys. We'll see you later. Peace.
This has been another episode of Real Estate Power Play, guiding real estate entrepreneurs to a brighter future. If you liked what you heard, consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast or follow us on YouTube at Real Estate Power Play.